One or two you really loved and maybe a couple you really hated?
Well, I would prefer to probably ignore anything I really hated.
Clint Eastwood never chased controversy. He didn't tweet, didn't explain, and rarely apologized. Yet, over a career spanning 7 decades, his blunt remarks, cold dismissals, and refusal to play Hollywood's game quietly created enemies. Now at 95, whispers of who he hates still circulate. Directors he snapped at, actors he dismissed, and public figures he openly criticized. The truth is sharper than gossip. Eastwood's conflicts weren't loud. They were deliberate, personal, and unforgettable. Some feuds faded, others never truly did. Spike Lee, the feud that got personal. Clint Eastwood rarely argues in public. For decades, he let silence do the talking, trusting his work to speak louder than interviews or outrage. That pattern shattered in 2006 when he clashed openly with Spike Lee, one of the few figures who managed to pull a sharp personal response out of him. The moment mattered because it exposed a side of Eastwood Hollywood almost never sees: impatient, blunt, and unwilling to indulge what he saw as performative criticism. The dispute began after Eastwood released Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, companion films examining World War II from opposing perspectives. Critics praised the restraint and humanity of both movies, but Spike Lee was openly dissatisfied. Lee accused Eastwood of failing to portray black soldiers who served in the Pacific Theater, framing the omission as a serious moral oversight rather than a narrative choice. His comments carried an implicit charge that Eastwood had ignored an important part of history. That implication was the breaking point. Eastwood viewed his films as specific, contained stories, not comprehensive historical textbooks. He believed a filmmaker's responsibility was to accuracy within scope, not ideological balance. When asked about Lee's remarks, Eastwood didn't hedge. He told Lee to shut his face and make his own movie if he wanted to tell that story. It was a rare flash of irritation from a man known for control, and it instantly became headline news. Hollywood media teased on the exchange, reframing it as a generational and cultural confrontation. Eastwood was portrayed as an aging traditionalist, resistant to modern expectations around representation. Lee was cast as a provocateur, willing to challenge even the industry's most revered figures. The actual disagreement, rooted in artistic philosophy, was quickly drowned out by louder narratives about race, power, and authority. What made the conflict linger was Eastwood's refusal to explain himself further. He didn't offer clarification, context, or reconciliation. In an industry that thrives on damage control, his silence felt defiant. Rather than defend his intentions, he returned to work, releasing films that grew quieter and more introspective with time. His later career emphasized restraint, moral ambiguity, and personal accountability, as if deliberately rejecting the culture of constant commentary. Spike Lee moved in the opposite direction. His public voice grew sharper, his films more overtly political. He became a central figure in debates about race, representation, and historical memory. Awards followed, along with renewed controversy. Lee embraced confrontation as a tool, while Eastwood treated it as something to be endured once and then discarded. There was no follow-up conversation between the two men, no public softening of words. That lack of closure is why the feud still resonates. It wasn't resolved because neither side felt the need to resolve it. Eastwood considered the matter finished the moment he spoke. Lee continued to challenge the broader system the exchange symbolized. With time, the clash came to represent two irreconcilable views of cinema. For Lee, film is a platform for correction and conversation, a way to confront historical silence. For Eastwood, film is a contained narrative, responsible only to the truth it chooses to tell. Neither position is accidental, and neither man ever pretended otherwise. Today, the feud is often cited as evidence of Eastwood's supposed bitterness, but that misses the point. He didn't lash out repeatedly. He drew a boundary and refused to revisit it. In a culture addicted to endless rebuttal, that restraint felt shocking. Spike Lee continues to speak loudly, challenge openly, and provoke debate. Clint Eastwood continues to work quietly, letting time and output shape his legacy. Their conflict endures not because it escalated, but because it ended so abruptly. The exchange revealed more about Eastwood than any press tour ever could. He has never been interested in being interpreted generously, only accurately. When criticism drifts into accusation, his patience ends. That quality has earned him respect, resentment, and misunderstanding in equal measure. The Spike Lee clash crystallized that tension, turning a rare outburst into a defining moment. It showed that beneath the calm exterior sits an artist fiercely protective of autonomy, unwilling to let others dictate how his stories should be told, remembered, or judged. For Eastwood, the argument ended there, frozen in time, while Hollywood kept debating it long after he had already moved on, unbothered, unrepentant, and entirely uninterested in revisiting it again. Next came a clash, not over art, but ideology itself. Michael Moore, ideology, ego, and Hollywood's loudest divide. Eastwood's conflict with Michael Moore was never about a single comment or one heated exchange. It was deeper than that, a slow-burning ideological collision between two men who represented opposite instincts in modern Hollywood. One believed celebrity should amplify political outrage. The other believed celebrity should stay out of it entirely. When those worlds collided, the tension was inevitable. Michael Moore rose to prominence by turning politics into spectacle. His documentaries, especially Bowling for Columbine, didn't just argue a point, they demanded applause, outrage, and alignment. Moore positioned himself as Hollywood's moral megaphone, unafraid to lecture audiences and colleagues alike. To Eastwood, this approach symbolized everything he disliked about modern celebrity culture. Eastwood had long criticized Hollywood's habit of public moralizing, especially when it came from people insulated by wealth and fame. He believed political views were personal, not performative. While he never attacked Moore in a sustained public campaign, his comments about Hollywood elites lecturing the country were widely interpreted as aimed directly at figures like Moore. The criticism wasn't subtle. It was dismissive. The tension became more visible during the early 2000s, when Hollywood grew increasingly vocal in the aftermath of the Iraq War. Moore became one of the loudest voices in the industry, using award stages and interviews to attack U.S. leadership and conservative values. Eastwood, by contrast, openly questioned whether entertainers had any business speaking for anyone but themselves. Moore didn't shy away from the contrast. He mocked conservative-leaning figures in Hollywood and framed dissent as moral failure. Eastwood, who rejected being placed into neat political boxes, found this worldview reductive and arrogant. He later criticized the idea that disagreement equaled ignorance, a comment widely understood as a response to Moore's brand of absolutism. What separated this feud from others was Eastwood's restraint. He never engaged Moore directly. No name-calling, no back and forth. Instead, he spoke in broader terms about celebrity arrogance and ideological conformity. That refusal to personalize the conflict frustrated Moore's supporters, who were accustomed to loud rebuttals and viral moments. Media outlets tried to manufacture a showdown that never fully materialized. Eastwood wouldn't play the role. His silence became the message. Where Moore sought confrontation, Eastwood offered indifference. And in Hollywood, indifference can sting more than criticism. As the years passed, their career paths diverged sharply. Moore's influence peaked during the height of political documentary filmmaking, then gradually waned as audiences grew fatigued with overt lecturing. His later projects received diminishing attention, and his public persona became increasingly polarizing. Eastwood, meanwhile, entered one of the strongest periods of his career. Films like $1 Million Baby, Gran Torino, and American Sniper sparked conversation without speeches or sermons. He proved that politically charged stories could resonate without overt messaging. To many, that success felt like a rebuke to Moore's approach. The ideological rift between them was never healed because it was never acknowledged directly. Eastwood didn't believe it deserved that level of attention. Moore, whose style thrived on opposition, had little to work with. The absence of a clear confrontation left the tension hanging, unresolved and quietly corrosive. In retrospect, this tension says less about personal animosity and more about incompatible philosophies. Moore believed silence was complicity. Eastwood believed noise was vanity. One trusted provocation, the other trusted restraint. Today, Moore remains a recognizable name, but his cultural impact has softened. Eastwood, even in his 90s, continues to command respect across political lines, precisely because he refuses to tell audiences what to think. That contrast explains why their conflict still feels relevant. Eastwood never needed to say he disliked Michael Moore. His rejection of Moore's entire approach to fame, politics, and storytelling said it for him. In Hollywood, where alliances are often loud and temporary, Eastwood's quiet refusal to participate became one of his sharpest rebukes. But if Michael Moore represented everything Eastwood disliked about celebrity politics, the next conflict would test his patience with power itself. Donald Trump, from respect to rejection. Eastwood's relationship with Donald Trump never followed a straight line. It began with measured respect, drifted into discomfort, and ultimately hardened into open disapproval. Unlike some of Eastwood's other conflicts, this one played out slowly, in stages, making it more revealing. It showed how Eastwood reacts not to ideology alone, but to character, and where his tolerance finally ends. In the early years of Trump's public persona, Eastwood expressed a kind of guarded admiration. He didn't endorse Trump as a politician, but he acknowledged his bluntness and willingness to say things others avoided. At a time when political correctness dominated public discourse, Eastwood appreciated anyone who challenged it. To many observers, this sounded like approval, and Trump supporters were quick to claim Eastwood as one of their own. The perception solidified after Eastwood's infamous 2012 Republican National Convention appearance, where he addressed an empty chair meant to symbolize President Barack Obama. Though Trump wasn't involved, the moment branded Eastwood as politically aligned with anti-establishment conservatism. When Trump later rose to power, many assumed Eastwood would stand firmly behind him. That assumption proved wrong. As Trump's presidency unfolded, Eastwood began distancing himself. His tone shifted from tolerant to critical. He described Trump as immature, divisive, and prone to unnecessary conflict. Eastwood made it clear that challenging political correctness was not the same as lacking discipline or restraint. For a man who values self-control above all else, Trump's behavior crossed a line. What made the rejection notable was its clarity. Eastwood didn't hedge. He didn't soften his words to avoid backlash. He stated plainly that Trump said too many things without thinking and lacked the dignity the office required. Coming from someone known for sparing commentary, the criticism carried weight. Trump, notably, never responded. The silence was striking. Trump is famously reactive, quick to insult critics publicly. Yet Eastwood received no counterattack. Some interpreted this as strategic restraint. Others saw it as recognition that attacking Eastwood would backfire. Either way, the lack of response underscored the imbalance of the exchange. Eastwood spoke once. That was enough. The fallout came from supporters rather than Trump himself. Some accused Eastwood of betrayal. Others dismissed him as out of touch. Eastwood seemed unmoved. He reiterated that he didn't belong to any political tribe and never had. Loyalty, in his view, was owed to principles, not personalities. This conflict highlighted a recurring pattern in Eastwood's life. He resists being claimed. Hollywood tried. Political movements tried. Fans tried. He rejected all of it. Trump's rise made that refusal more visible than ever. As Trump's influence grew more polarizing, Eastwood's stance appeared increasingly deliberate. He criticized division without aligning with the opposing camp. He rejected Trump's conduct without embracing performative outrage. In a media environment obsessed with sides, Eastwood insisted on standing apart. Over time, history reshaped the narrative. Trump became one of the most controversial figures in modern American politics. Eastwood, meanwhile, retained his image as an independent thinker. His criticism aged well because it focused on behavior, not policy. He didn't argue platforms, he argued temperament. That distinction matters. Eastwood never positioned himself as morally superior. He positioned himself as unwilling to tolerate chaos masquerading as strength. For someone who built his career on controlled intensity, Trump's impulsiveness represented the opposite of leadership. Today, the tension between them is remembered less as a feud and more as a turning point. It marked the moment Eastwood publicly refused to follow the anti-establishment wave he once cautiously respected. The rejection wasn't loud, but it was final. Eastwood didn't condemn Trump repeatedly. He didn't campaign against him. He said what he thought and moved on. That economy of words made the message sharper. It also revealed something central about Eastwood's character. He values restraint more than rebellion, and maturity more than bravado. The conflict wasn't personal in the traditional sense. It was philosophical. Trump embodied disruption without discipline. Eastwood had no patience for that. Respect turned into disappointment, and disappointment hardened into dismissal. For Clint Eastwood, that was the end of the conversation. And after rejecting a president, Eastwood turned his sharpest eye back toward his own industry. Matt Damon. The generational divide. Clint Eastwood's tension with Matt Damon was never explosive, never loud, and never acknowledged as a feud by either man. That's precisely why it mattered. This was not a clash of egos, but a collision of generations, old Hollywood discipline running headfirst into modern Hollywood comfort. Eastwood didn't need to name Damon directly for the message to land. Everyone knew who he was talking about. The friction surfaced through Eastwood's repeated criticism of younger actors and the contemporary film industry. He spoke openly about what he saw as entitlement, oversensitivity, and a lack of resilience among modern performers. Actors, he said, complained too much, talked too much, and worked too little. He contrasted this with his own era, where professionalism meant showing up, doing the job, and keeping personal struggles private. Matt Damon became the unofficial face of this critique, largely because of his public comments about mental health, therapy culture, and the emotional toll of acting. Damon spoke openly about vulnerability, self-care, and the pressures of fame. To many, these comments were progressive and honest. To Eastwood, they symbolized a culture that had grown indulgent. Eastwood never mocked mental health directly, but he questioned the public airing of personal struggles. He believed adversity was part of the job, not something to be managed with constant validation. In interviews, he dismissed what he called a culture of excuses, a phrase widely interpreted as a jab at actors like Damon, who spoke candidly about emotional strain. The contrast between the two men couldn't be sharper. Eastwood built his career in an era where actors were expected to be tough, adaptable, and invisible off-screen. Damon rose in an era where personal narrative became part of the brand. One valued silence as strength. The other viewed openness as honesty. Despite the tension, the two did work together on Invictus, a film often cited as evidence that Eastwood could collaborate across generations. But even that collaboration highlighted their differences. Eastwood ran an efficient, no-nonsense set. Minimal takes, little discussion, no indulgence. Damon reportedly respected the process, but the experience underscored how foreign Eastwood's methods were to modern actors accustomed to long rehearsals and emotional processing. Eastwood later praised Damon's talent, but remained critical of the industry culture surrounding him. That distinction mattered. He didn't attack Damon as an actor. He rejected what Damon represented, a Hollywood increasingly focused on feelings rather than fortitude. As Damon's career evolved, he became one of Hollywood's most vocal advocates for creative sensitivity and ethical storytelling. He took on producer roles, engaged in activism, and embraced public dialogue. Eastwood watched from a distance, unconvinced that any of it improved the craft itself. The media framed Eastwood's comments as out of touch or dismissive. Younger audiences saw him as resistant to progress. Older industry figures quietly nodded in agreement. The divide wasn't really about Damon. It was about whether Hollywood had lost its backbone. With time, Damon's career flourished in prestige projects and franchise work alike. He became a respected elder statesman of his own generation. Eastwood, meanwhile, continued directing into his 90s, maintaining the same demanding standards he always had. Neither man changed. They simply moved further apart. What makes this conflict enduring is its subtlety. There were no insults to quote, no dramatic confrontations to replay, just a steady undercurrent of disapproval from one of Hollywood's most powerful figures. Eastwood didn't need to single Damon out. His critique was systemic, and Damon happened to fit the mold. This wasn't a feud that needed resolution. It was a cultural shift made visible through two careers. Eastwood represented an industry built on endurance. Damon symbolized one built on expression. Neither approach is disappearing, but the tension between them defines modern Hollywood. For Eastwood, the issue was never talent. It was toughness, and in that debate, he never wavered. But actors weren't the only ones who drew Eastwood's quiet disapproval. Directors were next. Quentin Tarantino, violence, style, and two Americas of cinema. Clint Eastwood's tensions with Quentin Tarantino were never about personal insults or public feuds in the traditional sense, but the collision of their artistic philosophies was unmistakable. If Spike Lee challenged Eastwood on historical representation, and Matt Damon represented the younger generation's entitlement, Tarantino embodied a Hollywood obsessed with spectacle, indulgence, and stylized violence. Eastwood didn't need to attack him directly. His comments about excessive shock in modern films were enough to signal disapproval. Eastwood has long been known for his disciplined approach to filmmaking. Sets under his direction are efficient, understated, and focused on storytelling rather than spectacle. Tarantino, by contrast, thrives on extended takes, theatrical dialogue, and meticulously crafted violence. His films are celebrations of excess, often reveling in shock value, gore, and narrative twists designed to provoke audiences. For Eastwood, this approach represents everything that has gone wrong with contemporary Hollywood: form over substance, style over restraint. Their divergence became publicly visible in interviews where Eastwood criticized directors who rely on spectacle to compensate for storytelling weaknesses. While he rarely named names, critics widely interpreted some of these remarks as thinly veiled critiques of Tarantino's work. Tarantino, in turn, never missed an opportunity to dismiss the old guard, sometimes referring to Eastwood's methods as outdated or overly cautious. The mutual disdain wasn't personal in the conventional sense. It was philosophical, symbolic of two approaches to cinema. This conflict also underscores a broader generational and cultural divide in Hollywood. Eastwood's films are minimalist in tone, but monumental in impact, relying on restraint, nuance, and moral complexity. Tarantino's work is maximalist, emphasizing stylistic flair, intertextuality, and pop culture commentary. Where Eastwood values discipline, Tarantino celebrates indulgence. Where Eastwood trusts subtlety, Tarantino trusts spectacle. It is not surprising that these two filmmaking titans rarely, if ever, align. The clash isn't just academic. It touches on legacy. Eastwood is a living legend whose career has spanned acting, directing, and producing over 7 decades. He values mastery over recognition, craft over applause. Tarantino, though younger, has achieved cult status and immense popularity, redefining modern filmmaking for a new generation. Both command respect, but their approaches to storytelling couldn't be more different. The tension, then, is a microcosm of Hollywood's ongoing debate between old-school discipline and modern flamboyance. Despite the differences, there is an ironic symmetry. Both filmmakers have had extraordinary success and influence. Both command respect for their unique visions. And both have inspired countless actors and filmmakers. The friction, in a sense, validates both approaches. If your methods are influential enough to draw critique from a master like Eastwood, you are succeeding on some level. Tarantino's work may test the boundaries of taste and discipline, but it thrives because of its energy, originality, and audacity, qualities Eastwood admires in principle, even if he questions the execution. The media occasionally framed the tension as a generational feud, but in reality, it is a clash of cinematic philosophy. Eastwood does not publicly attack directors in a sustained way. He speaks in measured critiques, leaving observers to draw conclusions. Tarantino, ever the provocateur, has often embraced the role of challenger to tradition, even at the cost of incurring Eastwood's quiet disapproval. Their approaches also highlight differing views on violence in film. Eastwood often portrays conflict with realism and moral consequence, avoiding glorification. Tarantino's violence is stylized, almost theatrical, designed to entertain while shocking the audience. For Eastwood, this undermines the gravity of storytelling. For Tarantino, it elevates narrative into an art form that is deliberately provocative. Time has not bridged the divide. Eastwood continues to work with his characteristic discipline, releasing films in his 90s with an unwavering focus on craftsmanship. Tarantino continues to push boundaries, delighting audiences with his signature flair. The contrast between their approaches serves as a reminder of Hollywood's diversity and the enduring tensions between restraint and spectacle, subtlety and style. And while directors provoked Eastwood with their methods, the industry itself, critics, awards, and media narratives became his longest-running challenge. Hollywood critics and media, the enemy that never left. If Clint Eastwood's previous conflicts involved individuals, Spike Lee, Michael Moore, Matt Damon, Quentin Tarantino, his ongoing tension with Hollywood critics and the media is arguably his longest-running feud. Unlike one-off disputes, this battle spans decades, shaped by his disdain for performative judgment, moralizing, and a culture that prioritizes outrage over craft. Eastwood has rarely engaged directly, yet the friction is unmistakable, leaving an indelible mark on both his reputation and the industry itself. Eastwood's career has been defined by self-discipline, precision, and a quiet confidence in storytelling. He doesn't seek approval from awards committees, journalists, or talk show hosts, yet their scrutiny is inevitable. Over the years, critics have often labeled him reactionary, outdated, or politically conservative, casting his choices in the harshest possible light. Eastwood rarely responds, and that silence is strategic, a rebuke in itself. The tension with critics is particularly apparent during awards season. Eastwood has received multiple Academy Awards, yet even in moments of acclaim, reviews were often mixed, with some commentators questioning his political views or the moral framing of his films. While others see these critiques as standard journalism, Eastwood perceives them as intrusive, moralizing, and occasionally unfair. He has publicly expressed frustration at journalists who prioritize ideology over craft, implying that they misunderstand both filmmaking and human experience. Eastwood's distaste extends to the broader media culture, where controversy often outweighs content. He has criticized awards shows as performative spectacles and admonished colleagues for participating in media grandstanding. To him, the obsession with optics, political messaging, and instant interpretation undermines the artistry of cinema. When an actor or director faces criticism, Eastwood seems more concerned with the imbalance of power between creators and commentators than with the substance of the critique itself. While this may not qualify as a personal feud in the traditional sense, the cumulative effect is unmistakable. Generations of journalists, critics, and Hollywood insiders have learned that Eastwood doesn't play by their rules. He doesn't apologize to earn goodwill, explain to placate audiences, or argue to sway public opinion. That refusal to engage often frustrates the media, fueling narratives that he is stubborn, old-fashioned, or difficult. At the same time, Eastwood's approach has enhanced his mystique. By refusing to debate every review or public opinion piece, he positions himself above the fray. Unlike many stars, he lets his work speak for itself. Films like Gran Torino, $1 Million Baby, and American Sniper generated conversation not because of press tours or public statements, but because of their impact. The tension with media figures is part of what has allowed him to remain a commanding, almost mythical presence in Hollywood. Critics, for their part, have continued to comment, analyze, and dissect his career, sometimes harshly. Yet Eastwood's legacy endures, precisely because he treats criticism as transient. Where others might react, retaliate, or seek vindication, Eastwood does not. Silence, in his case, is a form of authority, a method of demonstrating that no narrative imposed by outsiders will dictate the reception of his work. The cumulative effect of this tension also underscores a recurring theme in Eastwood's life: autonomy. He doesn't fit neatly into Hollywood's social or political categories. His refusal to bend to critics or media pressure has helped maintain that independence. In a world obsessed with instant opinion, public feuds, and viral controversy, Eastwood's restraint is radical. He demonstrates that longevity, craft, and consistency outweigh the noise of external judgment. By the end of his career, Eastwood's legacy is shaped not only by his films, but by how he navigated criticism. He has outlasted fleeting trends, survived waves of moralizing commentary, and maintained control over his own narrative. For many, the feud with Hollywood critics is less about hate and more about principle, a refusal to surrender autonomy in a culture that constantly demands it. While individual conflicts fade, this ongoing tension endures. It reflects Eastwood's insistence that his work, and not outside opinion, defines him. Critics may continue to analyze, debate, and challenge, but Eastwood remains resolute, leaving the industry to reckon with his standards on its own terms. And with that, we close the chapter on Clint Eastwood's 6 most notorious conflicts, a lifetime of challenges, criticisms, and quiet dismissals that reveal the man behind the legend. Hollywood's unapologetic legend. Eastwood is definitely one of Hollywood's most enduring figures, admired as much for his work ethic as for his films. Across 7 decades, he has built a reputation as a filmmaker and actor who prioritizes craft over spectacle, discipline over drama, and storytelling over approval. His approach has earned him respect from peers and audiences alike, even when his blunt opinions created tension or drew criticism. Whether challenging Spike Lee, rejecting the performative politics of Michael Moore, or quietly dismissing the media's moralizing, Eastwood has consistently demonstrated a refusal to conform. Hollywood sees him as a paradox, simultaneously legendary and unyielding. He commands influence without courting praise, achieving iconic status while keeping personal life and opinion carefully controlled. Younger actors and directors may bristle at his critiques, but many ultimately recognize his standards as aspirational. Critics may debate his politics or filmmaking style, yet few can deny his impact on the craft itself. Even in his 90s, Eastwood continues to work, a living reminder that longevity in Hollywood comes from resilience, focus, and an unwavering sense of self. He has never needed to explain himself or chase relevance. In a world obsessed with image, viral controversy, and approval, Eastwood remains a figure both respected and feared. A man whose silence often speaks louder than most voices in the industry. In Hollywood, that combination of artistry, discipline, and unapologetic independence defines Clint Eastwood's legendary status. Clint's legacy speaks louder than words, from feuds to films. He's Hollywood's unshakable icon. Want more inside stories like this? Hit subscribe and stay tuned. Thanks for watching.